Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm super excited to be here today with a very, very special guest. Her name is Pepper Bethel. She's a seasoned financial planning consultant and a certified estate planner with 24 years of experience, specializing in helping families create long-term financial strategies and estate plans to sustain, this is the key, generational wealth. Pepper, welcome to the Prime Life Podcast, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you today. Thank you. Well, to tell you a little bit about me and my story and how I got here was I am from Southern California, born and raised, and I come from a long line of family of service members. So I started my career in the Navy, of all places. So I was 8 years in the Navy, and that definitely tells you a lot. But most importantly, it really solidifies you with this amazing extended family that you have. And I'm all about family, whether you are born with it or whether it's something that you just get along the way. Family is very important to me. So having that sort of foundation in the Navy with other service members really helps me kind of bridge that gap into my career as not only just a leader with regard to operations, business development, but also as a business owner. So I really value that time. And I also really value being around people. I am lucky enough that I get to be around people all day long, hearing their stories and sharing my stories with regard to hope and inspiration, and also just wanting to come from a place of education when it comes to financial wellness as well as estate planning.
So I love that phrase, financial wellness, because really at Prime Life Podcast, we're always talking about living longer, living better, and certainly financial as well as our personal health is really important. So tell us a little bit about how you integrate that into your practice.
Great question. I think the number one thing that really helps us as a company to integrate that is that we deal with people. We deal with people, and that's how we see them. We see them as people. These people are also small business owners as well, but first and foremost, they're mothers and fathers and grandparents. And that's how I like to kind of broach and attack it with my clients, is to come at you as I'm an individual, I'm a daughter, I'm a wife, I'm an aunt. I also want to come to you in that same way. And when we talk about financial wellness and being healthy with regard to your finances, that includes everything, right? That includes you being financially ready for what you have now. But just as important, making sure of that legacy that you're creating with those assets that you've worked decades for, that's also realized with your children, grandchildren, and so forth. So I think it's very easy to sort of start that conversation there. Hey, yes, you are this person, but at the same time, hey, I am the breadwinner and I am a father and a husband, and these are the responsibilities that I have. So I like to first start with that conversation, just saying, who you are as a person, and then we kind of lead it out from there.
That's a great segue for my next question, which is really like, what are the steps after you get to know someone? I know you explained, like yourself, I'm a wife, a mother, an aunt or whatever. After that point, what are some of the steps that you take individuals through? Because as we all know, it could be very overwhelming to say, you need this, this, and this. So tell us a little bit about that, Pepper.
Right before I even started this career, again, I have parents, and I've had parents that I've had to take care of. So yes, it does become really real, especially when you've gone through it first, and then you realize the significance of it, and you're like, this has to be a part of the practice. This has to be a part of the conversations that I'm having with these people that I get to sit in front of every single day. And for us, again, like I said, it first starts with that conversation, but then after that, to kind of break it down in sections, is I have a questionnaire. And I like to go over that questionnaire with our clients. And that questionnaire has everything: personal information, family information, businesses, assets, insurance, all of those things that you've worked hard for. That's what I like to break down first. So by having that questionnaire and going over that questionnaire with them really helps me kind of understand their situation, understand what their goals are, and understand really where they are in that particular stage in their life.
Yeah, I love that you said stage in their life because we talk a lot about this is a journey that we're on, and you need to meet people where they are because everyone's journey is unique. But I'd like to ask you next, what are some key documents that you can kind of rattle off for our listeners that individuals really should have in place or they should strive to make that their next action step?
Right. I think really to have a really complete and robust estate plan, you first have to start with a living trust. That living trust is going to be the anchor to all these other things that bring it all into full circle. And then next to accompany that living trust is you want to have something called a pour over will. Again, you want to make sure no matter how long it takes before you can get to your attorney or your estate planner, you want anything that you acquire during that lifetime to always point to that trust, right? Because we like that. We like trust because we don't want to go through probate. So we have the living trust, and then we have the pour over will, and then we also need to deal with money. So that means we need to have a durable power of attorney. It has everything to do with money to make sure that people who need to have access to funds and accounts as needed. Then we go next to the medical health directive, or sometimes people call it a medical power of attorney. Again, that has to do with things that have to do with health, right? If you have to be hospitalized for any reason, if you're going to be incapacitated for any reason, we really want to make sure that we have those people lined up who can make those decisions for you. And what I also like to put in is the HIPAA authorizations. Not a lot of people do, but if you've been through this, and I imagine a lot of you and your listeners have, if you've been through this stage where your mother had a stroke, your father had a heart attack, someone had an accident abroad, you understand just how important it is to have access and knowledge to your loved ones. And without that HIPAA authorization, you're getting nowhere fast, let me tell you. So I like to always make it just as important to make sure that everyone has a HIPAA authorization signed by their children or loved ones or whomever, so they're able to hear things about your diagnosis and also obtain any medical records if needed when it comes to that stage.
Yes, that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm fortunate to have a primary care doctor who often talks about those last two documents that you spoke of. And she, wants to make sure that information is up to date. And I love that she's done that with me because I feel very fortunate because I know some physicians don't want to go there.
Right.
They think, maybe not everyone has access to an individual like yourself that, you've put all of these documents sort of forthright in front of individuals. And you said, this is kind of what you need to think about doing. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, because this one always fascinates me, common misconceptions or missteps about estate planning. And I know that we may just be able to scratch the surface on this episode today, so we'll probably have to have you back to talk further about that. But what are some of the misconceptions and missteps?
I'm so happy that you asked this question. Because to me, again, I like to come from a place of education. I would like to educate all the clients that I work with and all of the families that I'm in front of every single day. And one of those things that we have to contend with regard to misconceptions or missteps is probably pop culture. Pop culture is probably one of the biggest, things that we have to contend with that gives us misinformation. And if you've watched any novella, soap opera from the beginning of time till now, you're going to hear people say stuff about, oh, you need to have a will. Did so and so have a will? All they talk TV shows, all they talk about is will, but no one else ever talks about any other forms. And obviously, as we know, there's a lot of other forms, really depending on your situation. So I think sometimes when I have to come from a place of education, I'm really having to contend with what people think estate planning is based on pop culture. based on what they've heard on TV shows and movies and things of that nature. And since people, all they ever hear is will, the first thing they come to me is they're like, Pepper, I need a will. And I thought, and then again, I have to come from that place of education and saying, let me first tell you what it looks like. Let me first tell you what that process looks like. Let me first tell you what it means to even have an estate plan. Because to me, the most important thing in that sentence is plan. It's important to plan. We plan for everything, right? We plan with car insurance and health insurance. But the one thing that we kind of lack in planning is with regard to our estate planning. So again, I love to come from a place of education. I love to come and talk to people about it, what it means and what it means for you and what it means for your children and your grandchildren, what it means for if someone gets remarried. I love to have those conversations to let them know, hey, this is what it might look like for you in this particular instance.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as you said, like if someone remarries blended family, like have you updated those documents? No, I haven't. I completely forgot about that point that you just made. What do why is it important to consider both the health and the financial wellness together when planning for retirement?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
Nassau is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years. But we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
I love this question. I think they really go hand in hand. And I think that sometimes until we're kind of faced with that situation, we don't see it yet, right? So again, we're going along and no one's passed away yet, but then it gets to maybe your grandparent passed away. Maybe you're in your 20s or 30s and then you don't see it. You're like, what? And so you're like, oh, so-and-so, grandma left me the jewelry or grandma left me this, or maybe you start to see it. But when we start to see our aunts and our uncles and, our parents pass away, then it really comes into focus of what they built, those assets they had, where do they go and how did they get there? And how long does it take for them to get there? So that house that you grew up in, and those were your parents' house, and they've now passed away, what does that mean for your siblings? Right? So now we've tied something that had to do with their health and at their demise. Now we look at what their assets are. Now we look at bank accounts. Now we look at businesses. Now we look at property, jewelry, things of that nature. And initially, we never probably tied it back to our health and our well-being being tied to things like assets and money and things and heirlooms, right? But they are. And I think it just takes sometimes to have that one person that passes away. And when you go through that, you're like, oh, this is all tied together. I didn't realize that, right? You don't think about it. You just think about, oh, this person passes away, then we need funeral and burial insurance and life insurance, stuff like that. But we don't think about where do those life insurance proceeds go? And how do they get there? And what's the time that it takes to get there? And who says they get there? Right? So I think as we kind of go through our life's journeys and our different stages or levels in life, then we see, right? Because in our 20s and 30s, maybe it doesn't touch us yet. But as we get to our 40s and we have families, and not only do we have children may be going into college, and then we have older, parents who we're also taking care of, right? We're in that kind of sandwich generation, aren't we? So we see both sides of it, things that we're caring for younger people and things that we're caring for our older and our elders as well. And that's when we start to see how that kind of comes together. That's how health is tied to finances, which is tied to estate planning.
I love that. I love what you just said. And And that sandwich generation is so real. Many individuals are faced with that, and there's anxiety that comes with that. But I would love for you now, because this is again a great segue to talk about why is it important for families to discuss financial planning and estate planning with their children earlier than later? And so how do you bring families together? Because I know there's some angst with that, like, parents they only want their kids, and they're not even kids, they're usually grown adults deep. But there's really more than XYZ to know as you're pulling together families, again, to describe exactly what you just did. So talk a little bit about how you gather families. When is it the appropriate time, and how does that work?
Well, initially, again, when I'm meeting with my clients, I, from the very beginning, push family. From the very beginning, push that this should be a family discussion right from the very beginning. If I have a husband and wife coming to me, or maybe sometimes it's the husband alone or it's the wife alone, then I always go, hey, I would love for us to meet again and have a deeper dive into this. But next time, please bring your wife. Next time, please bring your husband. When I have them together, and again, because it's a lot of conversations, as you said, this is a lot to go through. And sometimes it gets quite emotional for some of us when we're going through this process, and rightfully so. And right from the beginning, when I have those conversations with the parents, when I bring in what stages and what is it meant to have, you're the grantor, you're the trustee, but I need to have a backup trustee, and I need to have this person or who's going to be the executor. And I said, it's really important for those people who are going to be in those roles for this to us be a part of those conversations as well. So please bring your brother in. Please bring the kids in. Please bring your mother in. Because if you're going to be naming these people as executors or backup trustees or attorney in facts, then they need to understand what responsibilities they have. They need to understand what your estate planning documents, as naming them as such role, what that means for them, right? And I always love to incorporate that. It's a very, kind of a slow step-by-step process that I take, because this is quite daunting. This really is. There are so many sort of, mental reactions that really come into play when we're talking about that. I mean, just to get people in the door to even start to talk about estate planning is very, I commend them. I really do, because I know it's not an easy topic. I know it's not comfortable. I know the subject matter can be a little sad, because then we're going to think about, well, remember what happened when your mother passed away? And do you remember what happened when cousin Bob had to, and then everyone had to scramble and no one knew what to do? Do you remember what happened when your grandmother and they didn't know what the house to do? So sometimes, in a very healthy way, I like to draw on that. I like to draw on that to let them know that, you love your family, you love your kids. You really don't want them to have to go through those stresses that you went through when they couldn't find the deed and they didn't know who was what, and is that was really their restaurant, or do they only own 10% of the restaurant, and where were the documents? I can't find the documents. Did they go back to, because she's from El Salvador? All these things really kind of come up. So I really appreciate that, and I really respect them to even making the first step of coming in and make an appointment just to have a consultation. But every step of the way, I want to bring in as many people as possible. And again, even when it's over, I said, again, please feel free to have the children call me. Please make sure that your kids can call me, and let's have a meeting again so we can talk about it. Now that it's done, what do we do now? Now that we have a trust, now what's important to do? Now we have to fund the trust. What does that look like, funding the trust, right? And what does that mean? Who has access to it? So if there's anyone that you have named as a part of these estate planning documents, they need to be in here so we can talk about it. But they at least need to have a copy of these documents so that it doesn't come to the very end when you've met your demise and they're just like, I'm the executor? She named, what is an executor again? And what does that mean? And do I get paid? And is it a job? Is it a job? All these things come to light, and you're also grieving. So you have to grieve for these amazing loved ones that you have. But you also have to make sure, look, okay, we need to go to the business part of it and just make sure, okay, is this divvied up with the beneficiaries? Do you have to get, how many copies of the death certificate do you have to get? It just goes on and on. There's so many levels. And I really like to sort of be with them on each of those levels, because again, it's not easy. Once you plan it, and then when it actually happens and someone passed away, you'll be so surprised. People forget everything we spoke about. And they're just like, all they can just do is dial my number. Pepper, I don't know what to do. And I love to be a part of that. I really do, because I know not easy any way you slice it.
Right. I can imagine, right, with the anxiety and stress, right? It's like, what can you focus on?
Yes.
and it's like they can dial your number question regarding. So you set these plans in place, but as you know, your life changes, situations change. So how often do you recommend that documents get and perhaps revised? Because also people pass away, maybe you change your mind about who your executor will be, et cetera. So how do you, what's your advice on that?
So my approach initially is I like to kind of go through the life stages that the person is in. So if they're in their late 20s and say they don't have any children yet, or they don't have, maybe they just bought their first condo, I may say, hey, you know what, or if I know what they're doing, like, hey, we're going to try to get pregnant the first 12 months. So I may check in with them a little more often, right? I may check with them a couple of times a year just to make sure, because in those years, right, 25 to say, late 30s, you have a lot of change in your life. You have, children being born, you have marriages, you have, hey, I bought my first house. Now I bought the second house, now we have a rental property. So with that, during those times, if I know kind of what stages you're going through in your life cycle, I like to probably meet with you a little more often, right? But as we get, if we're, in our 40s, 50s, and then like the kids may be gone, and now we're kind of maybe downsizing a little bit, I like to at least meet with you, once or twice a year, just to make sure that I'm on top of, what changes are being made. And also kind of what the plans are too, right? If we're saying, hey, you know what, now when we reach 62, we're going to, sell that property, and then now we're going to go to the Bahamas and we're going to live in that place, So again, it's all those, every couple, every family is different, right? But I like to be a part of that planning too, so I can know that, okay, so this is going to happen in the next 3 years. So I at least want to meet with you once a year. But I really like to take it, personalize it per family, right? Because I know what that family is doing and what they're going through. And it's like, hey, I know we're doing this, or, I'm in the military now, but after 5 years, I'm going to, separate from the military. So then, right. So once I know those plans, I'll know how often I want to check in with you to make sure 2-3 times a year, maybe. Okay. Or maybe it's 1 or 2 times a year.
Oh, I love that. Can you share a very short story about a client without naming too much about that client where you've made a difference because they came to see you?
I have to tell you, this may get me a little emotional, but about 2 years ago, a family was referred to me, and it was a gentleman who was unmarried and didn't have any children, but he was very close to his sister and his sister's children. So at some point, his health started to deteriorate. And while that was happening, he had the forethought to say, hey, I think I need some help. So he had spoke to a friend of his, and they referred them to me. So having this family come in and meeting the uncle and then the mom and the children, it was just so beautiful to kind of share in that with them. So what we do, he had a lot of property. So what he wanted to do is just kind of organize his estate, especially knowing that he didn't have any children. So he wasn't sure how the law worked and what that would mean for him. So I was able to help them kind of understand what the process looks like and what it meant, and to make sure that his properties were going to be safeguarded and go to the family that he wanted. So that was just an amazing, beautiful thing. They're really great people. But unfortunately, that gentleman passed away in less than a year. And when he passed away, again, this is what I was saying, is that we had went through everything what that process looks like, but his sister and her children came to me just grieving, and all they could do was just barely get the words out. So that's when I said all they could know was just to call me, but they didn't really know, okay, what do we do now? We know that we did all this planning, but we don't know what it means now. Like for this stage, what does it mean? So again, I was lucky enough to be able to be with them on that journey and go step by step with them as they went through it, grieving all the way. Again, this just was happening like just a couple of years ago. So again, you see the planning part of it, but you also have to understand there's also another side of it too. And that side is someone is going to meet their demise. Someone is going to have to take those things that they plan for and implement them. And as much as we plan and we think we plan that it's going to happen, and these people are going to be grief stricken and they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know who to call. And it's important. And I feel honored to even be a part of that process with them, to be able to help them get to that next level, with the minimal amount of stress. They're already got a lot of things going on. So Again, it was just a beautiful thing to be a part of. I was happy to be able to help because that disease that took him, no one knew what it was. No one knew what it was. They just knew that his overall demeanor and his energy had changed. And again, like I said, he knew enough to know that, hey, I got to do something. Something's not right. And again, whatever happened, whatever that disease was, and I think it was cancer, it took him, and it took him quickly.
Well, I'm sorry for that loss, but as you said, his family, and actually he was so lucky to have met you and to have you that, trusted partner, if you will, that they could depend on. And, as you said, like the time frame, like no one knew how quickly that happened, and yet it did. And so I thank you for sharing that beautiful story. That is, amazing. So before we kind of get near the end, and we will ask you our final question that we love to ask our guests, I would love for you to share a few tips that individuals can take action on tomorrow, today, or in the very short term.
I think initially what I like people to know is that if you have something in place already, please do not set it and forget it. If you had something that even at the beginning, you got married 15 years ago and you had something in your name and now this is the wife and the kids, please have it reviewed immediately. And I think that's an action that we can all take right now. If you have something in place, please make sure that you go to an attorney, a certified estate planner, someone that can help you to say that these laws have changed. Or yes, you have you're married to Sue and now you're married to Jenny, or hey, your kids aren't in here. So I think that's something that I would really urge someone to do, sooner than later, that if you have something in place, please make sure that you get it reviewed. Please make sure that you look at it to make sure that it really applies to your life right now and not to your life, 15 years ago or when you were overseas or something like that. I think that I would really urge people to do that, right now. I think I would really want them to do that now. Other than that, I would think that I would urge people to, start with a conversation. Please, let's start with a conversation with someone, asking someone, what should I do? What does this look like? And again, any of us out there worth our salt are happy to help. There are free consultations for everything. What we really want is we want you to be protected. We want you to not have everything that you fought for, everything that you've grown over 20, 25 years of work to go to some sort of probate court. We don't want that. We want to make sure that what you fought for and what you've grown goes to the people that you did it for, and that's your loved ones and your family.
Well, that's beautiful. Super. You've done some amazing things in your career. You were in the service, and we thank you for your service to our country. You could get up every day and do pretty much anything you wanted. Why do you get up every day and do what you do? What's your why?
I think for me, it probably starts with being of service to others. I think growing up in a family where you saw people doing things for other people really kind of solidified the foundation of who I was going to be no matter what. And growing up and seeing people, hey, I'm in the Navy, I'm in the Army, these are people that are helping. I come from people who, watched foster children. Again, you don't have to do that, but that's what my parents did, to say, hey, there's a child in need, how can we help? And I think I've kind of taken that charge as far as I can to say, this is what I'm going to do for, my level of success, my level of hope, is that this is how I want to help people. And again, it's ingrained in me. It feels great. This is what gets me up, to be able to help people. And like I said, come from a place of hope, inspiration, education. That is what we're here for. That is literally my charge. And I happily do it every single day.
Well, if more people in our world had that attitude, everything would be wonderful. And I commend you for going deep within yourself and using your empathy, compassion, and your kindness to help others financially and I'm sure you help them beyond finances. So that's beautiful to hear. And I thank you. And I want to thank you for coming on to the Prime Life podcast. But before we go, what's the best way an individual or a business owner, whoever, if they want to get a hold of you, what's the easiest and best way for them to contact you?
Yes. Well, like you said, there's definitely many ways to come at me, whether it be the website, telephone, email. But I think for most people, the easiest way is through LinkedIn. Please come at me through LinkedIn. I am on it all the time. I'm, networking and always meeting new people and introducing other people to other people. So again, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, any other of the other avenues as well. But for most people, that might be a lot easier. Again, day or night, please reach out to me with questions, comments, anything. I'm so happy to help.
Well, that's great. And we will post everything in the show notes just for those listeners that are wondering, Pepper Bethel. That's a unique name, I believe, and find you on LinkedIn, and we'll post the other links to websites and whatnot. Thank you today for joining me. We want to thank our listeners and follow us, like us, give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. We look forward to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Thank you so much and have a great day. It's great to have you, Pepper.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.